there becomes essentially partnership or partial ownership
Yeah.
in those scenarios.
Yeah.
And, somebody coming in and maybe wanting to have 100% and not having a license, you're going to have some hurdles that you're going to have to jump through.
It's going to be very difficult.
So I am Chip with Transworld Business Advisors, and we are doing an episode of Chip's Tips. In this case, SBA edition. Jeff Katz with Live Oak. Jeff, introduce yourself and kind of tell us how you're involved with Transworld to start with and kind of why we interact on a daily basis.
Yeah, great. Yes, again, Jeff Katz. I'm with Live Oak Bank, and I've been doing SBA lending for a little over 20 years now. Started out in the underwriting world and then moved over to originations. And we've been working. Live Oak has a really great relationship with Transworld Business Advisors, across the country. And so, we do a lot of business together and have a great relationship. So.
Cool. All right. So one of the things, you and I were talking, and I kind of want to get into more this being a buyer's edition type thing.
Yeah.
And I want to get into, as you know, I do a lot licensed trades.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings up some hurdles that we always have to get around.
Right.
And I'm going to take that into another phase later. But at this point, let's talk about cash buyers versus SBA buyers and going after licensed trades. So let's kind of do top level here first with, can a buyer buy a trade that needs a license? And actually for this discussion, why don't we go with HVAC, because that's a fairly easy one and one that we get calls on a lot.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to buy an HVAC company, they want to take out an SBA loan, what do they got to do, and what are some of the parameters that they have to consider when they're looking at listings?
Yeah. So this is something that has been a challenge, I think, for most every SBA lender, with regards to licensing. And, unfortunately, there's really not a black and white scenario. It's kind of, it seems to just be a perpetual gray area. But I would say that a rule of thumb would be two situations. You have a buyer who, they don't have a lot of industry experience, but they really want to get into it. Maybe they have good transferable skills. But you do the research, you just kind of do a discovery with the buyer, and, they realize that it's going to take more than a year, for them to acquire the license needed to run the business.
So at that early stage, when they're looking at it and they don't have that year planned out, or how do they even, let's go this way, let's back it up. How do they get to that year? How do they operate for that year if they buy it?
So if it's going to take them more than a year to acquire the license, then that's typically, for most SBA lenders, going to be kind of a difficult situation. In that case, we would probably want the seller to retain some portion of ownership, as well as guarantee the SBA loan. So,
which most sellers aren't real comfortable with, because that license, they're signing off on those jobs for a year where there's a new buyer on board.
Right. The other alternative is to find a partner up with somebody other than the seller who has the license, the necessary license, and maybe give them a portion of ownership of the business
if they have that partner.
Right, if they have that partner.
In a scenario, so I've had a couple of small HVAC companies. So it's funny, right? You kind of have different levels of things. You have some small ones and you have some big ones.
Yeah.
The big ones are sort of easier to find solutions for, right? But a couple of the last ones were, 2-3 vans. There'd be a couple technicians, maybe an office worker. In those scenarios, you have somebody coming in and say, I want to be the owner. I don't have a license. I don't have a background.
Yeah.
The business is going for, say, $500,000 to $700,000, and that guy wants to inquire on that business with no plan for the license. And, let's say the seller doesn't want to qualify somebody for that year. What position does that put that buyer in?
Yeah, I mean that's a really difficult position. SBA may not be the best option for them.
Right. So that takes them into a cash or other options.
Right.
Right. Kind of what I want to get at is that, there's SBA guidelines or things that you guys have to work in that buyers have to understand when they're going in and looking at some of these listings of what your parameters are. And getting that license has to be part of that plan.
Yeah, it is. And the other part of what I was going to, kind of talk about and discuss was if the buyer can get the license within, less than 1 year. So typically 6 to 12 months. That's a little bit different of a situation for SBA lenders. You can have the seller qualify the business. However, the buyer has to show, they have to have a plan for, okay, what does it look like to get that license within the first 6 to 12 months? Do you have, do you have the necessary experience? Do you have the necessary number of hours that the state requires? When can you? What is the earliest you can sit for the exams? When would you expect to get the license after taking the exam? So you really have to have a game plan laid out for, okay. You really have to put some thought into it, have done some research with the state, the state regulations.
Is that something you're helping those buyers with and coming up with that plan and helping them figure that out, or that's something they're doing on their own?
That's something they're doing on their own. I mean, I can give them, kind of guidance, as I just, laid out. But it's really, the onus is really on them to kind of, based on their background, their work experience.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something as brokers we're helping them with.
Yeah.
But kind of the highlights I'm trying to get at is that some people don't ask you, the lender, enough questions for the listings that they're going after.
Okay.
And I really think that causes a lot of problems with things.
Yeah.
Some licenses are easy, right? I've got one right now that's a pool cleaning company.
Yeah.
So you've got a pool cleaning license, you have a pool repair license. Pool cleaning you can get simply. The repair license you can get in less than a year.
Yeah.
So you can plan that out.
Yeah.
But HVAC, plumbing, electrical, some of the others, you're going to go over that time frame.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where it becomes difficult for most SBA lenders, I believe.
Yeah. So let's go back into what you threw in before, which was, okay, yes, because everybody hears everything on the internet. Everybody has a buddy that does a deal. Let's go into I got a buddy with a license, or maybe the seller hangs on portion, right? Let's go into I'm not going to be able to get a license in that time frame. And are there avenues within the lending process that we can get there? Which, again, you already touched on them. I just kind of want to go into a little bit more. So explain those kind of two routes that you threw out earlier a little bit more. Hey, I've got a buddy with a license or an actual employee. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, if we can get the seller to hang around, kind of explain those two things.
Yeah. So if you have, a partner with a license, then, as I mentioned before, they can partner up with them. You can discuss, ownership percentages if they're willing to come on as an owner. They don't necessarily have to guarantee. I think that's going to be more of a case-by-case basis.
And when you mean guarantee, you mean actually on the loan?
Personally guarantee the loan. Yeah, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis for, depending on the SBA lender.
Yeah.
But, that would be the ideal situation, I think, for, somebody who has a partner lined up with them that has the license. They're going to want to have, in my opinion, the lender's going to want to have that partner have some kind of consideration and possibly skin in the game with a guarantee.
Right. So there becomes essentially partnership or partial ownership in those scenarios.
Yeah.
And, somebody coming in and maybe wanting to have 100% and not having a license, you're going to have some hurdles that you're going to have to jump through.
It's going to be very difficult. If you want to be, if you want to be 100% owner, you don't have the license, however, I think it's going to be very difficult if you cannot obtain that license within the first year. It's going to be very difficult to get financing.
And then what about the scenario to where if the seller hangs around for a little while afterwards? And when I mean a little while, I mean more than that year point that we talked about earlier, right? So
Right.